ain't got
Alright guys, welcome. Today we're going to make this scene from Kong Skull Island completely free in Blender and DaVinci Resolve. So, if you're ready, let's get started and jump in. As you all know, I started off with adding in a cube. Oh, wait, I added a sphere this time. I'm going to have to watch my own tutorials more. Subdividing it and sculpting it into looking like Kong. I used the grab brush to pull out the arms and legs, and the smooth and clay strips brushes to refine the details. The model doesn't need to be too high quality, because all you're going to see is the silhouette, so no point wasting time on what the audience won't see. Then I added in an empty hair to Kong, and used the add brush to add hairs all across his body. I then combed the hairs around the edges of Kong, as they're the only ones that will be seen. I quickly modelled a helicopter in edit mode with a cube, and then refined it more in sculpt mode with the smooth and inflate brushes. I then made some simple propellers for the helicopter, and then parented them to the helicopter so they could be animated separately. If I were you though, I would do as I say, not do as I do. Don't sculpt the helicopter, just try and model it. Trust me, it's going to look neater. I only sculpted because I was pressed for time. I enabled the ANT landscape and sapling tree gen preferences, made a simple mountain, duplicated it, and changed the seed value for each one. I then made a tree with the sapling tree gen options that looks fairly similar to the ones in the reference. I then exported this tree as a preset, so I could use it over and over again. Then I added more of the same trees, just changing the seed value for each one. This is a quick way to achieve variety in your models. Next, I converted the tree curves to an object and instanced that over a plane with geometry nodes. I used random value nodes for scale and rotation, and weight paint group for the density, and boom, we've just made a forest in 10 minutes. Texturing this scene was an absolute breeze. I gave Kong a black emission texture and used a noise texture plugged into a color ramp for the trees, ground and mountains. I added some subsurface scattering to the leaves of the tree to allow the light to go through them. For the water, I used another noise texture and plugged that into the normal of a glass shader. To texture the sun, I used a black body node and plugged that into the color of an emission shader. A black body node will give the sun more accurate colors as it's based on heat. I also used the same displace modifier trick that I used with the moon in the ET render I did with the sun here to make it look like there were heat waves distorting its image. If you want to see exactly what I mean, well, you're gonna have to watch the ET video. I'm just kidding. You've watched this far, so I'll be nice. Add a displace modifier to the sun, make the texture a noise, add an empty, animating it moving up, set the orientation of the displace modifier to Z, and object to empty, and you're done. For the sky, I got a HDRI from HDRI Haven, plugged it into a color ramp, set it to ease, and made it red and yellow. To make this render look more cinematographique, that's French for cinematic, we're going to need to add some volumetrics to the scene. So I started with the clouds by multiplying a noise texture with a gradient texture and plugged that into the density and emission strength. I gave the clouds a bit of emission so they would appear more white in the render. I also added a volume scatter node set to an orangey color. I also turned up the anisotropy to 0.99. This results in a nice glow effect around the sun. As far as animation went, it was pretty simple for this render. I wrote Kong with Mixamo, attached a simple animation to him with Plask, downloaded him and cleaned it up with a graph editor by moving the shoulders and arm rotations around a bit. And then reduced the amount of keyframes that made up the animation and pressed smooth keys to make the animation, you guessed it, smoother. For the helicopter blades, all I did was set 2 keyframes for the rotation. Once all that was done, I moved on to simulating. I still hate it. I spent 3 hours tweaking, waiting and tweaking over and over and over again. For the fire, I got a circle and set it as inflow with fuel at 3 and sampling substeps to the max. Also used a noise texture and animated its offset to make it look like the fire was moving across the ground. For the smoke, I used a sphere and resolutions division of 64 with noise turned on at the default settings and dissolve at 15. The render is going to take ages, so to speed it up, turn up step rate render for volumes to 10. This is going to make the volumes render much faster, and it's not going to lose that much quality. I then set the light bouncers to 3 and noise threshold to 0.1. I did a few other tweaks along the way. It was still going to take too long after that though, so I used Shrek's favourite technique of layers. Yep, I rendered out the scene as 4 separate layers, those being Kong, the smoke, the other volumetrics, and the rest of the scene. To render things out with a transparent background, just set the collection you don't want in your render and check the holdout option on, whilst keeping the render option on. Ultimately, rendering out layers helped me reduce the render time by half. Sometimes, my genius, it's almost frightening. In the Blender Compositing tab, and then combined these separate layers with an alpha over nodes, and then rendered them out. I then imported the EXR sequence into DaVinci Resolve, added the 2 LUTs and got to work color correcting. I dragged the offset so it was more yellow and increased the highlights and shadows. Also brought up the lift so the sun was brighter. When I added the smoke, there was a bit of it that didn't look too good at the bottom, so I cropped that bit off and animated the crop distance across the shot to complete the trick. And with that, I give you guys the final result. Unless you're one of the 5% that skips to this part, in which case, I'm watching you. Thanks for watching, guys. If you could like and subscribe, that would be great. And if you have any suggestions for any other cinematic scenes I should make, please leave them down in the comments below. Now I'm going to let you get on with the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.